To render a list group, first, let's see what markup we need to work with. So here on Bootstrap website, under documentation, let's search for list group. So on this page, you can see a very basic list group. And here's the markup that we need to work with. A UL with the class list group. Inside this UL, we should have a bunch of list items with this class, list group item. So here in our list group component, let's return a UL with the class list-group. Inside this UL, we're going to have an LI with the class list-group-item. Now we want to render these items dynamically. So first we need to pass props here, use object destructuring to read the item's property from the props object, and then map each item in this array to a list item element. So items.map, we get each item and map it to this element, like this. Now, because we're using the map method, we should give each item a unique identifier. So we set the key attribute to item._id. Next, we need to render the text of the item. So here we're going to render item.name. Now let's test the application. So this is what we get. On the left side, we have the list of genres, but I think this column is a little bit too small. So here in movies component, I'm going to change this call-2 to call-3. Okay, that is better. So we're successfully rendering the items, but there is a tiny issue with our implementation. Here in our list group component, we're assuming that each item has these two properties, _ID and name. What if we're working with a different kind of object that doesn't have these two properties? Maybe instead of _ID, that property is called value. So we don't want to be coupled to this interface. We want to make our list group more flexible. To solve this issue, we need to pass two more props here. These props will determine the name of the target properties, ID and name. Let me show you. So back in our movies component, here's our list group. I'm going to add a couple more props. One is text property, which I set to name, and value property, which I set to _ID. So when we're using the list group, apart from passing the list of items, we should also pass the name of text and value properties so we can work with any kind of objects. Now back in our list group, here on the top, we need to pick these two properties from our props object. So text property and value property. With this, instead of using the dot notation to access these properties, we'll use the bracket notation to access properties dynamically. So I'm going to replace this with brackets, value property, and item.name with item of text property. With this change, we are no longer coupled to our genres, and we can reuse this list group with any kind of lists.